Thank you again for joining us. First, let me welcome Bill Purcell as the leader within the IT Enterprise Support Organization for Paychex. And Bill and I will be discussing and sharing knowledge management success stories and practices from the front line. Bill, welcome.
Well, thanks so much, Pete, and wanted to thank all the attendees for attending. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share some of our lessons learned on such an important subject of knowledge management. We're real passionate about the subject, and I'm really grateful to be here today. Thanks, Pete.
Well, thanks, Bill. So Bill and I have met on a number of occasions, and as we were shaping up the content and discussion for the radio program today, we wanted to just set a few things up that we thought the audience would be interested in hearing about Bill's journey to successful knowledge management. The difference really in how to build a cultural imperative for change was one of the things that Bill talked about and we'll be talking about today. How to leverage good planning and implementation practices around implementation of the tool or integration of the tool. Some training on KCS, knowledge-centered support practices, is definitely a differentiator between those who can sustain a practice versus those who can't. Also, the importance of communicating between the different groups and teams of those who have the knowledge to those who need the knowledge. And then we'll talk something about what kind of success goals Bill set up for the team. But basically, knowledge management plays that critical role in the way we deliver support and how we deliver support based upon shifting resolutions and answers closest to the customer. What we find is that KM success is based upon 80% of a people effort versus really 20% of integration in the tool and enabling of the tool's capabilities to make the process happen. So we're going to talk about self-service adoption as well as how to use it from a typical support model with tiers. We're going to talk about the importance of integrating it into the ITIL incident management process flow as well as the tool itself. We're going to talk about how important KCS was to Bill in terms of setting the stage for those best practices and training his team and the coaches for what's the right thing to do around knowledge management and how to continue doing it. And then really how to practice what we call UFFA, which is the use, flag, fix, and adding of knowledge articles stored in a single source of truth. I'd like to set off the stage with Bill and just talk about the last year of my experience with knowledge management. I've had the pleasure now of writing 2 white papers around different success programs out there in the industry. What I'm finding is that there has to be a sense of urgency around knowledge management for a number of reasons. And I go back to one of my favorite quotes: if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less. And as I put it to the fact that knowledge management is something that we need to harness across the enterprise, there are 3 areas that I think we need to look at in terms of an imperative change around knowledge. One is we have to become really good at publishing very good, relevant content in a timely manner that speaks to end results. The second one is we need to make sure that the technologies we have deployed allow us to easily capture, publish, share, search, and use knowledge for some end around solving problems, sharing experiences, collaborating and communicating with different people within the organization. And then lastly, connecting this vibrant community that we have out there in terms of our employees that are distributed and geographically dispersed, and getting them to really get excited about what they can do and contribute in the knowledge management imperative. So with that, Bill, I'd like you to kind of just set the stage and tell us where Paychex was a couple of years ago with your current situation back then as it was, and where you saw the need and the challenges for implementing a knowledge management program.
Well, thanks, Pete. About 4 years ago, we were in a situation where we had kind of the convergence of a couple different problem statements. One is we didn't effectively do knowledge management. Like a lot of service desks, we had knowledge going on in different intranet portals and email and different repositories of procedures, but the reality was they weren't that effective. We had a lot of folks sharing information, or experts had people constantly coming and pinging them for answers, which was impacting our productivity. So we kind of had a convergence, one of some internal process improvement initiatives identified really a need for that, 2, we had a major product offering here at Paychex that was right around the corner that we knew would bring some volume into the service desk, and we needed to effectively handle that in a way so that we could really empower our users and clients to do what they needed to do with this new product effectively and really increase productivity, within our service desk. So additionally at that time, we were doing some ITIL certifications within the management team. We did a simulation of such, and one of the things it showed additionally was that you can't really be successful unless you're really working through knowledge management. If your third-level teams and product folks can't share knowledge with the service desk, or you can't share knowledge through your self-service tool, it's really hard to be productive and really deliver the world-class customer support to your ultimate clients and provide business value that you need to do. So when you kind of had the convergence of those things going on, we started a project. It was funded, and we looked at the various tools out there, and frankly, we were a bit myopic at the time, thinking that the solution would be, you go out and you look at a tool and you buy that tool and implement it, and you solve your problem. You solve your problem statement. As your slide earlier said, that it's 80% the culture and 20% the tools. It really hits the nail on the head. And unfortunately, right out of the gate, we weren't looking at it that way. Thankfully, we were smart enough to read a lot of white papers and look at some of the industry norms out there on knowledge management. We studied a lot about KCS, and we went to a couple different trainings, one through the vendor of the tool that we ultimately went with, and another one through HDI, through knowledge-centered support training. And it was tremendously helpful and really got us going where the culture was really what we needed to concentrate on. Building a culture of knowledge and really empowering our folks to build and create and use knowledge in an effective way. And once we kind of turned that corner and concentrated there, our knowledge approach very much came a ground-up approach from our employees up versus, your typical, management down of this is the new process or the flavor of the month type of initiative. So we implemented first within our service desk using knowledge. A lot of the knowledge that we use in the payroll business here at Paychex is proprietary to us, so we had to create some of that. And then about 9 months later, we turned on our self-service, and it totally transformed our service desk from a productivity standpoint, but more importantly from a customer service and efficiency standpoint. Our cost per contact went significantly down, our client service scores went up, and our service level attainment went up, which is kind of like a trifecta. Without adding resources, when you can impact your quality, your output, productivity, and most importantly, your client service, that's a real trifecta. So it was a big success for us, and it was a team effort. Very much our employees supported it. We went after the culture seriously, and our employees embraced it, and that was a key ingredient to the success.
That's a great story, Bill. And you mentioned something about getting the project approved or funded. Did you do anything differently? How did you capture kind of senior management's attention that of all the priority things that were on their plate, this was something that they had to fund and do and support?
Well, I think in many points, one of the mistakes that are often made is that when you have a new initiative coming down the pipe that needs attention, we often look at it as, oh, it's going to take this, that, and then the answer is, no, we can't do it, or something to that regard. I think it's really important to turn that paradigm into, yes, we can, and this is what it will take. And the answer to that can't always be hiring staff. In our case, we put a proposal together of what we saw some increased volumes with a number of new product offerings that we were doing through Paychex's growth as a company, and we knew we would need X amount of headcount to sustain that growth, and it was a meaningful amount to the bottom line. So we put alternatives to that. If not headcount, these are some of the types of things that would be supported, that we would need to support. And top of that list was really going after a knowledge approach, which included budgeting for a tool, which wasn't overly expensive, and really going after the culture and implementing that. And we got a lot of support right from our current CEO down to right down to the management level. And they took particular interest because they saw the importance of that cultural piece in knowledge. Like a lot of companies, Paychex is a service business. And companies come to us because of our expertise and our knowledge. And if we can't effectively utilize that knowledge internally to support our clients, you know, the level of support and what we need to do in the 21st century won't be there. So it was very important to us. We certainly captured the attention of our senior officers, which brought that support both culturally and obviously for the project and initiative. But I think the cultural piece ended up being far more important. They bought into what we were doing. We actually implemented during a really busy time for the business. We had their buy-in because they saw how important strategically this was. And we concentrated constantly on the different prongs of support. We needed our end business users to understand what we were doing, our own staff that were going to be essential to creating that knowledge, and of course our upper management team knowledge of what was going on all throughout. And I think we did a pretty good job of keeping those three prongs of communication active.
Bill, how important was scope to you? I mean, you know, sometimes people get aggressive and they get wide-eyed and they think they could, you know, implement it all. How important was scope control to you in terms of really building confidence and credibility with the knowledge piece?
Yeah, I think that's a real critical point. I think realistically, we looked at the project in phases, and we looked at, you know, that this was going to be an evolution. And we knew that the total evolution, you know, would take years. And I would argue, even though we're many years into it and been highly successful, we're still evolving along. You know, I rate on a scale 1 to 5 of our maturity level. We're at a 3 today. So we're still evolving, even though we're probably one of the more successful companies doing knowledge management today. That being said, controlling that scope was critical. So once we went into the project, we looked at this is what we wanted to do first, was the service desk. Even though it was so tempting to turn on self-service early, we kind of fought that urge, or that scope creep, as you may want to say, so that we could effectively roll it out the right way, not waiting too long, not being too conservative, but being right where it needed to be. So when we rolled it out, it was effective, people's first impressions were good, and such. As we started seeing initially in the service desk within about 3 or 4 months, a little earlier than we expected, we started seeing some real productivity changes going on in the organization, noticeably ones that couldn't be attributed to anything but knowledge. The temptation very quickly came of, okay, let's just turn on self-service, or you know, let's skip a few steps along the way. And you know, we were real careful to be aggressive but realistic with that scope, and I think that's real important. I think another mistake from companies I've talked to is concentrating too much in the scope on the tool versus the culture, keeping the scope in place with the overall bigger picture of what you're doing. Because if you lose track of what's important, it's too easy to produce the perfect knowledge tool while ignoring the people and process part, which is vitally important.
Yeah, no, I got that loud and clear from you and from the others we talked to in terms of building a successful knowledge program, was that the focus had to be on the people, the culture, building the right team. As I show this slide up here, Bill, this is kind of a typical tiered model, and one of the things that I really liked about, you know, the story that you had to tell was how you went and built a team, and I think a lot of us struggle with getting the Tier 2 managers and teams embraced into the knowledge management concept because they typically own a lot of the content and a lot of the expertise. Can you share with us some of the things that you did to engage the Tier 2 subject matter experts to contribute knowledge for the successful program?
Sure. I think that, you know, one is to take a step back first is this was very much an initiative that embraced the staff all around. Our success was absolutely predicated on their buying in to it. We spent a lot of time in the rollout talking about, you know, what is knowledge management, the methodology, why it's important. We did some good exercises of what, you know, what's in it for me, what's going to change for me, why is it important, and what are the common objections. And we spent probably more time than a typical initiative talking more about that than, frankly, how do I use the tool or how do I add knowledge, more about the whys of why it was important to the company, why it was important to the future of our department, and probably most importantly, rolling out, why is it important on the day-to-day of their job, and putting it in the terms that they would see certain benefit. And for the first level 1 caregiver, service givers, those are different than your level 2 and your level 3 folks. But in it, there's a common trend of I can get answers faster, I can resolve issues quicker, and I can have information on my fingertips if we fully embrace. One of the most common objections in knowledge management is, if I know the answer, why do I have to look it up in the knowledge base? And that's an important cultural piece that you have to tackle, because a lot of your SMEs think they already know the answer, and often they do. But they're a key piece of the overall fabric of knowledge management because they're a part of your quality control. So if your most knowledgeable people aren't using the knowledge base, they don't see when knowledge is missing or when knowledge may even be a little bit off base, or they may be aware of, it might be a good article, but they're aware of an even more efficient way to resolve the issue in a safe manner. Or they might see, this step is missing, it'll resolve the issue, but really for safety you should do an export of that table before you do that. And they learn real quick the value that they can have. And you have to celebrate that knowledge with those folks. And you can't underestimate the cultural piece. We spent a lot of time the first year celebrating the different accomplishments. The SMEs that wrote the articles, we'd have contests that would recognize the SMEs that wrote the articles that got used the most. So we looked at different ways that we could celebrate in the organization and really reward and recognize those people that were making a difference. And what they found was that those subject matter experts would have a shorter line outside their desk at times. They could spend more time on some of the more complex work, which is frankly a lot of the work that they found more fulfilling in their day-to-day job. They wanted to work on more complex issues. They wanted to work on some of the things that they didn't get around to as much because they were fielding questions all day. But once the knowledge base went in, they could invest some of their time into the knowledge base, which freed up time of all the inquiries that they would get so that they could work on more worthwhile work from their perspective.
Yeah, more strategic projects. I think that's the big sell there when you go to different Tier 2 organizations who have a separated project list and a service and support list that gets escalated from the support center. And, they're always struggling with balancing which is a priority and which to get to first. And, what's in it for them is that if they work with you and, they publish the knowledge, and you use it and commit to that and measure it and reward and celebrate it, then they should see a decrease of those escalations and routing and all of those things and get more time for project. Is that what you guys found?
Absolutely. And let me tell you a story, Pete, and it's kind of a backward story. We had an example that came to me within the first 6 months of rolling out from one of our development managers that came and said, you guys have been encouraging us to spend time to provide knowledge article material, but, we've been giving that feedback, but here's an example of this issue that came to us this week, and, we've provided this information already to you. I don't see this knowledge thing working. We're still getting issues that we know we've provided the information to now, in knowledge articles for you to use and be self-sufficient. So I took that and I did some investigation, listened to the feedback, did some investigation, and they were right insofar as that one example did fall through the cracks. The person who searched didn't use the most adequate search terms that they could have, and they didn't find the article, and they went to this developer. Obviously, any level 3 is your most expensive type of issue. So, obviously, if you can resolve that in level 1, you should be able to do that without ultimately going to a level 3 resource. And, you get that answer back to the customer that much faster and such. But anyway, when I looked at that article, it had been used a few hundred times. A few hundred times. So when I went back to the manager, I said, well, first let me apologize. That issue should have never got to you. You're right. We should have did it. We talked to the analyst. They'd used some wrong search terms. From that perspective, we did a little training with that individual. We think it's a one-off situation. But let me share with you that as I looked into that, I noticed that that article had been used a few hundred times, that in the old way, a year ago, we probably would have contacted you a few hundred times. But now, because you've shared that, that's 200 times your developer is working on, new code for our products and services as opposed to being hit with the same question over and over again. And it allowed our percentage and our reliance on third level to chip away, to be less and less. And I think that's the key. When we look at our reliance on third level, it's about a third of what the Gartner average is for service desks. And we couldn't have done that without knowledge management. And when I go to our experts, either at second level or third level, we can very much celebrate that and see the difference that it's making both to our bottom line and, most importantly, the quicker resolution of issues for our clients so we can service them better.
I love that story, Bill, because one of the things that I get from that story was the importance of going back to these Tier 2 managers, these subject matter experts in these groups, and communicating with them that their knowledge article content that's being added is being used. And so we have an opportunity, a responsibility that when we engage them to author, to go back to them and let them know what the benefits are of the use of the knowledge they're creating.
One of the other things, Steve, and we knew, when we studied the white papers that there could be a benefit here, but we didn't realize how meaningful to the business it would be. And that was the trending that we were able to do off the articles, which is another benefit our different product managers and third-level type, second and third-level type of analysts and managers now very much see and breathe and see the value in is, obviously, as you're using articles and it's hitting tickers against that, we run monthly reports of the most frequently used articles so that we can fix the issues most impacting our clients. Prior to knowledge management, yeah, we had an IT service management tool that we could do trending off of, but it wasn't as valuable of information and it wasn't as insightful as what we can pull from our self-service knowledge tool and the knowledge used within our analysts within our service desk so that we can fix the most impactful issues, and it's much less those discussions about priority of what we're fixing and not fixing are more based on fact versus people's emotion and such. And that has a real value to those same people, our developers that are coding systems or our engineers that are building things, so they can see and really concentrate on the work that's happening most frequently and most impactful. And it's been one of our most significant sources of information for going after the right thing for our clients.
No, that's great, Bill. And I just wanted to kind of talk about this concept that you and I have hammered around for quite a bit of time now, this concept of creating a single source of truth. In the last year in working with people that have been successful with knowledge management and those who haven't, there always seems to be a realm of excuses of why not to do it, or we do it well now, or what's the benefits. There's always challenges that people can kind of throw into the program that would work to either derail it or to really challenge it. And I love the idea of the single source of truth. And one of the stories that I heard recently kind of maps to your story about headcount was that this group was poised for growth in terms of the business, and they needed to expand the Tier 1 group by about 10 to 12 people. And the problem is that they didn't have a knowledge base that people had confidence in. They didn't have that single source of truth that they could use as a training ground or as a ground for those new people to come in and have instant access to the repetitive type issues that the group would be reporting, which means they needed to do a start from scratch training program, which took 3 to 4 or 5 months and really burdened everybody within the system, and they weren't really successful at it. So, really coming back to that whole thing about the single source of truth knowledge management program really could position the support center for growth without having to add headcount or to have to do onboarding training in the most typical manner. Is that kind of what you guys found as well?
No question about it. I mean, a couple of things with the single source of truth. On the front end, it means that your front end support analysts don't have to look at many different repositories of information. I don't have to go through email and out to this department and whatever. Well, our analysts told us in the very beginning that they were spending typically about 5 minutes per call often looking for information in disparate places. It existed somewhere in many cases, but it also wasn't in a place that was updated, so their trust in that information wasn't there. By having a single source of truth that is reviewed and updated and constantly used gives them that confidence. But another part that it did, obviously, as I mentioned before, it improved our service levels, and we were able to improve customer satisfaction and our service level attainment to restore issues quicker, faster, better, without adding resources. And in fact, in some cases, in some teams, we went down resources, but we're still able to improve those numbers, because of the efficiencies that happened. But it gave new business potentials to problems. Yep. And we had a rollout in our desktop area that we were getting a sudden increase of calls to our employees, users, Paychex employees, desktop computers and laptop computers. In the past, using contractors for us wasn't a great opportunity for those short peaks of volume when there's a big rollout or something to that effect because of the ramp-up time that it would take to learn the Paychex infrastructure and Paychex-specific types of issues that we had. And what we found after we rolled out knowledge management and got a little bit of maturity was we very much could do that now. We could ramp them up in a very short period of time. So when we had these spikes that would last for a month or two, we could go out, contract a handful of resources to meet that need for a short period of time without having to add headcount. And they had this resource, the single source of truth, that they could reference, which would significantly reduce ramp-up time for those folks. So we could go after the business problem in a different way. More importantly, for when we hired new staff into our other groups, regular staff, they were able to hit the phones, or even our level 2 people were able to really resolve even more complex issues in a much quicker pace than they did before, which adds real business value.
I really do, think that it's a responsibility of that service leader to think strategically in this way, right? Which is, at times during my, year or business cycle, we're going to have areas within our ecosystem that are going to cause spike in volume. They may be unplanned or planned, but either way, I need to be able to have an augmented staff somewhere that I can bring on that could come on without a lot of onboarding training and be able to add value quickly. And I think the single source of truth brings that to the table.
No question about it. And what I'll add to that, Pete, just real quickly, is one of the things we thought, we're a pretty good-sized service desk, and we have different products and services we offer. We're able to plug and play from one team to another that we weren't able to do prior to having that single source of truth that we are today. So we can move somebody from one product group temporarily to another group because of a rollout, a big project rollout or something like that for a month or two. And they're able to have real efficacy, not as much as a native person in that group, but they're able to have real business value enough to meet that spike without having to do more drastic or expensive types of solutions.
Well, Bill, one more thing before we go on to the people end of it, because I love the stories that you have to tell and the experiences around the people and the training and the building and the coaching. I love the balanced metrics, of customer satisfaction, productivity, service level adherence. I also like the fact that, you're trying to create a single source of truth, and the ultimate kind of balanced metric of that is the confidence that the analysts have in that repository, and that one question that you ask the analyst, do you have confidence in your knowledge base, I think speaks volume to the quality of the program. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that was something that, through surveys, both our service desk first and our end users that use the self-service, and we've had really high results of their confidence. Doesn't mean perfection. And right. I think that can be a mistake, is that sometimes as you seek one of these initiatives, you can seek to create perfection, which is very expensive. If you have those resources, that might be okay. Most companies don't. So, you do what you need to do to have an excellent knowledge base, and you keep measuring that. You keep getting feedback from those that use it. And we've seen very much here a lot of confidence in the knowledge base, and we see a lot of repeat customers to those, self-service users. Particularly our service desk folks don't really have a choice. They have to use it. But those that, even though they have to use it, 96% of them, when we rolled it out, within 3 months, said this was the right thing to do. People like myself that have been in the service desk a long time, and many of the folks that have been here a long time have been able to say very clearly this is the most significant thing that we did to improve their job in 10 years, or even longer for some of the folks that have been here a long time. Interestingly enough, our turnover has significantly reduced. People are more happy in their positions when they can get at information quicker. I guess that probably should be common sense. People want to give good quality support. They want to provide that end user or that client the solution that they need to get back whole quick. They don't want to have to ask around. They don't want the delay associated with finding that answer. When they can get it at their fingertips, they can deliver that quality support is what they want. They feel better about their job. When they feel better about their job, you retain them as an employee.
No, and even extending that out, I know a group now that definitely had its challenges for different regional support. The businesses in those regions were growing. They felt the centralized support center didn't know who they were or what was going on. And what the service leader did was he thought that maybe adding business knowledge into the single source of truth that was reflective of those regions or business units, and have the support people access them and know more about what was going on within the area, so that when customers called, they could actually personalize the support experience, that they had deeper knowledge of what was going on technology and business-wide, and that gave them more credibility with the customers.
Yeah, this year here at Paychex, due very much to the success that we've had within the service desk and self-service, that a number of our business units, our customer service business units, have jumped on the bandwagon, so to speak, similar to our methodology and how we're doing it. We're using the same tool so we can share each other's knowledge where it makes sense and have a single source of truth beyond just IT knowledge. And we're really excited about that. It's making a real difference. It brings a lot more usage to our self-service portal, and it's been a real game changer. So early on of them using it, because we've just implemented it this year with our customer service givers, but it's been a real success. And it's really something we're proud of here in IT, because the business came to us saying, gosh, you guys have really done a great job. We'd like a piece of that. And can you help us be successful in that space? And we have, and now we have one, so we don't have competing knowledge bases, all of that, and we all gain from sharing that knowledge, and we're excited about it.
Good. Well, I definitely want to hear more about that, Bill, when we talk about the social aspects of knowledge and start to extend it out to a broader conversation in the business. So hold on to that thought. I want to hear some stories about I love the training program you put together to get people bought into it, to get their knowledge of KCS and then the tool. And so tell us something about, how you built the team, how the team added to the cultural aspects of knowledge, and then what kind of training you put forth to get the team together to make sure that they were doing the right things at the right time.
Great. Well, first off, we follow a KCS methodology. The Consortium for Service Innovation really spent a lot of great time and effort creating. And we follow 90+% of that methodology, which was real helpful in rolling out. But one of the things in the project before we rolled out that we realized is that this was cultural. This wasn't like you slam in a tool and you solve the problem. We really needed to go after cultural aspects of our organization. So when we went to create our initial knowledge team, we figured that we were going to need what we call KCS coaches in each of the teams to be that cultural ambassador or evangelist, if you want to use that term, within the teams to really spread knowledge and keep it front and center and raise people up in both training and in getting the team to adopt it. So we went out and looked as managers. We believed that having managers in that position wasn't the best idea. We really needed it from the ground up. So we went and identified who on those teams, not who is the most knowledgeable, not who's been on the team the longest, who would be the most positively influential. And we believed that by identifying who would be most positively influential in those teams, we'd have the greatest chance for success. So we did that. I think we did a great job at that. Those coaches ended up being probably the single most important aspect of our initial success. They enthusiastically embraced it themselves. Obviously, they went through the cultural training first and had the opportunity to kind of poke holes or have their doubts and answered and kind of work through those. And then they started utilizing, they became our testers, as we went through the project also. And then when we were ready to roll it out, they were very much already enthused and excited about what was coming, and that enthusiasm really bled throughout their teams, and it made a huge difference. They do some of our quality, they do our training, they keep it front and center, they keep knowledge as the key part. You often hear, Pepsi makes soda or Xerox makes copiers. Your service desk should be creating knowledge, and the coaches, by having them there, really from the bottom up, living, breathing, keeping it exciting on their teams, doing contests, all of those types of things, was really key to that success.
That's great. I love the story, and if you could, the coaches, they weren't necessarily the top performers, correct? They were people that you thought were going to be great at the role.
Exactly. We looked at who could influence, who would be that exciting person to keep it front and center, who had those types of skills, not necessarily the top ticket closer, not necessarily the biggest subject matter expert, those types of things. And that really paid off. We had, in one case, one of our coaches was one of the newest people of the team. They'd been on the team about a year, and They didn't have nearly the experience that other team members had. They weren't necessarily the most productive person, but they had that personality and they had those gifts that really allowed them to be that facilitator, that evangelist, and exciting, and that ended up being the most successful team at Rollout, and I don't think that was coincidental. She was tremendously excited about the opportunity. She grabbed it, ran with it, came up with a lot of great ideas. You know, we molded to some of those ideas over the first 90 days. She came up with a lot of great things of improvement, you know, process improvement types of things, and you know, we tweaked along the way. And that team was, you know, the biggest user of knowledge right out of the gate, and that certainly wasn't by accident.
That's fantastic. Bill, just quickly on the KCS principle of UFFA. You had talked about that you require your support analysts to use the knowledge base. And it seems like you have set expectations accordingly in terms of UFFA, namely you expect and you hold people accountable to using, adding, fixing, and flatting. How did you do that? How did you create an environment and culture that, you know, really expected it and monitor it and hold people accountable where most people are really challenged by that?
Well, let me take a step back for a second, because the why is really important. Prior to rolling out knowledge, when we used to visit our branch offices and said, what are the one or two things that we can improve on? What we heard was consistency. We talked to John, we get one answer. We talked to Jane, we get a different answer. And that really resonated. We heard that consistently. And effectively, if you allow a knowledge base or a knowledge management methodology to allow people to self-select out, every time you self-select out, you're losing value in the ability to keep that knowledge base up to date, and you're certainly losing the opportunity for that consistency. And that was really important to us. And one of the key principles of KCS is, you know, everybody plays, everybody wins. And UFFA is kind of the backbone to that. Use it, fix it, flag it, add it. You know, so for every ticket that comes in, we use it, meaning we search and we link to, in our IT service management tool, that article, which helps us with trending, like I mentioned before, and all of that. And it also saves them, you know, from typing the answer, you know, all the information. They can very quickly move on to the next call, and it gives them consistent steps, you know, to what they can do to resolve it, even if they think they know the answer. And some of the times you'll talk to people, they think they know the answer, and then they say, oh, I didn't realize that I should export that table first as an extra precaution or something to that effect. There's often improvements that can happen even from your knowledgeable staff. The fixing it and flagging it's a little bit more rare, not as common. You know, basically fixing it means you go see something, you're like, gosh, I'm aware this is up to date, and you're empowered to go update the article with what that new step based on your expertise is. Flagging it is similar to that. You see something's wrong or something didn't work, but you may not be knowledgeable enough to fix it, so you can flag it so that a SME then can go take a look at that article and respond to the concern. And last but certainly not least is adding. So if you don't find it, you have the obligation to add it. And for us, that's very much incorporated into our incident management process. So if you go out, you resolve the issue, there was nothing in the knowledge base, before you close out that issue, you need to add it to the knowledge base. You certainly don't want to just put it on a to-do list because it'll never happen. You need to really incorporate that into your process and allow your folks time to do that. Interestingly enough, Pete, was that in our first few months, we had a lot of contests, like I mentioned before, to help make it fun and successful for the culture. One of the contests was giving awards and prizes to those that wrote the articles that got used the most. One of the things that I asked a number of people that won that award month to month was, when you wrote that article, did you know that it would get used 400 times? And their answer always was, I wasn't even sure it was going to be used another time. But, you know, I was following what the expectation was to share knowledge. I found a workaround to this issue. And more often than not, they were stunned how many times their article got used. We as human beings don't have a very good ability to predict the future. And very often, those issues that somebody says, oh, I'm not going to add an article if they don't have to, this probably won't happen again, or it's so infrequent it's not worth adding an article to, often become your breakout issues or get used a lot. And you really need to incorporate that in. So for our staff, we required 80% of the tickets that they opened on level 1 or closed on level 2 that they had to either use, fix, or flag or add knowledge. And we hold our folks very much to that number. It's on, they get a monthly UFFA score, and they're managed very much to that. And it shows up on their annual review. It's very much tied to the merit type of increase that they might get at the end of the year and those types of things. So it's a real important thing for us. And overall, it hasn't been a problem. It hasn't been a problem. People embraced it. We had a handful of people that really needed to be managed and encouraged. But overall, it hasn't been a problem because people really have embraced it. They see the value. 90+% of people want that in the end because they want the vibrancy of the knowledge base.
That's great. Bill, as we approach our time, I'd like to just kind of talk about this right here. It sounds like you're at the point in time where you have extended the conversation out and included the business, and the business seems to be responding well to it. Do you have any plans to extend it out to sharing socially in terms of capturing that collaboration, communication amongst the different people out there in Paychex that might be an extension of the single source of truth?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The answer to that is yes. We're not doing it effectively today. We have some social tools within Paychex internally that are used. I would say that that extension of where knowledge, where those two discs kind of overlap, we definitely would like to do something over the next year, but it's an area that is a part of our future methodology. And I think as we kind of wrap up some of the rollouts with our customer service groups, this is going to be one of the next things to really tackle.
Well, good. I know we can have many sessions on knowledge management and the social aspects of it ongoing. And Bill, I just wanted to take the time to thank you for contributing and sharing your experiences and lessons learned with our audience today. Congratulations. Great.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity, Pete, and I want to thank you along the way for a lot of the advice that you gave us to help be successful. And we're passionate about this subject because we really see the impact that it makes. Again, this was the biggest thing that we did. The biggest mistake that we made in this is that we didn't do it 5 years earlier. So anyway, thanks, Pete, for the opportunity, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Bill, and you do the same. And thank you to our audience in Thought Rock today for allowing us to be with you. Our next Pete Talks will be Tuesday, December 11th. And joining us will be Malcolm Fry. So he'll be talking about the power of metrics, reporting, and storytelling. Please don't miss it. Also, if you like the session today, please help us grow our community and audience. Pass the word on to your colleagues. We would appreciate it. Also, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any opinion and feedback that you'd like to share with us regarding today's show or future topics, please reach out to me at any one of these contacts or our production partner, Thought Rock, at these phone numbers in contact as well. And we wish you all the best this week and on your successful journey to Knowledge Management Program. Once again, please put down Tuesday, December 11th to join us and Malcolm Fry speaking about the power of metrics, reporting, and storytelling. Thank you again for joining us.